There are moments when love doesn't end with shouting or slammed doors. It ends quietly, so quietly you almost miss it. Not with tears, not with rage, but with a sound you feel before you understand. Like ice shifting under your feet. Like something inside your chest tightening and refusing to let go. At the company party under warm lights and polite laughter, I heard that sound. Behind the bar between glass shelves and dim reflections, I saw my wife kissing my best friend. My heart didn't race. It stopped. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I turned to his wife instead. She looked at me calmly and said, "Stay calm. We need them to show their hand." My name is Ryan Caldwell, and until that night, I believed in quiet stability. I was 51, living in Chicago, long enough to stop noticing the winter, unless it became dangerous. I worked as a senior operations manager at a consulting firm where nothing flashy survived and nothing sloppy lasted. I believed in systems, in documentation, in doing things right even when no one was watching. I believed my marriage worked the same way. Emily and I had been married for 23 years. No scandals, no dramatic lows. Just a slow shift I couldn't quite name. Conversations that ended early. Dinners eaten side by side instead of together. The unspoken understanding that work came first until one day it didn't. The holiday party was held downtown in a hotel ballroom with chandeliers too large for the ceiling, and jazz played just loud enough to drown out honesty. HR called it relationship building. Leadership called it visibility. Emily insisted we attend. "People notice who shows up together," she said, adjusting her earrings in the mirror. "It matters." She said it gently, reasonably. The way you say things when you've already decided. At the party, she drifted away from me within minutes, pulled into conversations near the center of the room. She looked confident, relaxed, seen. I watched her laugh at something Mark said. Mark, the man I'd known since my first year at the firm. Mark Reynolds had been my closest friend for over 2 decades. We'd shared promotions, bad bosses, inside jokes that survived layoffs and restructures. Our wives knew each other well. Our lives were braided together in ways I'd never questioned. Mark clapped me on the shoulder near the bar, handed me a drink, joked about the music making him feel old. Everything felt normal. Too normal. After a while, the noise became unbearable. I excused myself and moved toward the bar, needing a moment where no one expected anything from me. The bar ran along the side of the room, partially hidden by tall arrangements and backlit bottles. The bartender polished glasses. Someone laughed nearby. The bass line of the music thumped softly through the floor. I stepped closer and saw them. Not out in the open, not careless, but tucked behind the bar in a narrow blind spot only someone familiar with the room would choose. Emily and Mark. His hand rested on her waist, hers curled into the collar of his jacket. The kiss was unhurried, practiced. Not stolen, shared. The kind of intimacy that doesn't ask if it's allowed. The room didn't spin. I didn't gasp. My body simply shut something down. My chest tightened so suddenly I thought I might pass out, standing up. My fingers went numb against the bar's edge. For a second, I wondered if this was what people meant when they said their heart froze, not metaphorically, but literally, like a muscle that refused to keep going. I don't know how long I stood there, seconds, maybe longer. The party went on. Glasses clinked. A woman from HR called out for another round. The music never stopped. I stepped back slowly, as if sudden movement might break whatever was holding me together. That's when I noticed Lisa. She stood across the room near the edge of the dance floor. Her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Her eyes weren't searching. They were fixed on the same narrow space behind the bar. She had seen them too. Our eyes met. I expected shock, tears, anger. What I saw instead unsettled me far more. Recognition. She walked toward me, her heels steady, her face composed. She stopped beside me close enough that I could smell her perfume, clean, familiar. She didn't look at Mark or Emily. She looked straight ahead. "Don't react," she said quietly. "Not here." I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "You knew." "For a few weeks," she replied. "Long enough to understand what this really is." I turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" She finally looked at me then. Really looked. "This isn't just about the affair," she said, and confronting them now would only give them room to lie. The words cut through the fog in my head. "They'll call it a mistake," she continued. "A misunderstanding. They'll say it wasn't intentional." I shook my head slightly. "Then what are we supposed to do?" Her voice stayed level. "We wait." "Wait for what?" For them to present it themselves, she said. So no one can pretend this was an accident. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the calm in her voice with the collapse happening inside my chest. Across the room, Mark laughed at something Emily said. She leaned closer to him, unaware or unconcerned that everything beneath her was already cracking. Lisa spoke again, softer this time. I didn't want to believe it at first. 20 years doesn't disappear overnight. But lies do one thing very well: they leave trails. What kind of trails? I asked. The kind that don't end in the bedroom, she said. They end on paper. I felt a cold realization settle in. This wasn't just betrayal, it was planning. She placed a hand lightly on my arm, not to comfort, but to anchor me. Stay calm, Ryan, she said. We need them to finish what they started. The music swelled. Someone clapped near the stage. The party surged forward like nothing had happened. But something had. I didn't feel anger yet. I felt focus. For the first time that night, I understood that what I'd witnessed wasn't the ending of my marriage. It was the opening scene of a reckoning. And this time, silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I left the party alone. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look for Emily or Mark. I walked past the valet stand, pulled my coat tight against the Chicago cold, and stepped into a night that smelled faintly of snow and exhaust. The city was already dressed for December, dirty slush at the curb, Black Friday banners flapping from lampposts, people rushing with bags and plans that didn't include me. Emily texted 20 minutes later. Got pulled into a conversation with legal and finance. Don't wait up. I stared at the message at a red light. The words felt carefully chosen, like someone practicing a lie they'd already told themselves. Okay, I typed back. It wasn't forgiveness, it was containment. The house was dark when I got home. Quiet in a way that felt staged, like a model home after closing hours. I set my keys down on the entry table and stood there longer than necessary, listening. No television, no dishwasher. Just the low hum of the furnace fighting the cold. I poured a glass of water and drank it too fast. My hand shook and the glass tapped the counter with a dull sound that echoed through the kitchen. In the living room, the Christmas tree glowed half finished. Emily had wanted to decorate together once that things slowed down. I stood in front of it and felt something inside me give way. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a seam coming undone. I sat on the couch and looked at my reflection in the black window. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. Not because he looked broken, but because he looked alert. Awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I didn't cry. That surprised me. When Emily came home close to midnight, I heard her before I saw her. Heels off, keys dropped, a sigh that sounded rehearsed. You left early, she said, walking into the living room. I thought you'd still be there. I wasn't feeling great, I replied. She nodded, already moving past me. Long night. She kissed my cheek, quick, familiar, efficient, and went upstairs to shower. The water started. I stayed on the couch counting the seconds between breaths, wondering if guilt sounded like running water. When she came to bed, she fell asleep almost immediately, her back turned to me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, cataloging moments I dismissed for months. Late meetings that ran past midnight. Passwords changed without explanation. Her phone placed face down on the table. The way she'd stopped asking about my day. At some point before dawn, a thought settled heavily in my chest. The worst part wasn't the kiss. It was the certainty that she'd stopped seeing me long before it happened. The next morning I woke early. Emily slept on her face, relaxed, untroubled. I watched her for a moment, searching for signs, remorse, anxiety, anything. There was nothing. In the kitchen, I made coffee and drank it standing up. The news played softly, headlines about markets and layoffs and rising costs. I checked our joint account while the coffee cooled. Nothing dramatic, no large withdrawals. But there were patterns. Small transfers. Consistent timing. Labels vague enough to pass unnoticed. Consulting. Travel advance. Numbers that repeated like habits. I told myself it was probably nothing. I didn't believe it. At work, the office buzzed with post-party energy. Did you see Mark working the room? Emily really knows her stuff. Big presentation coming up. Mark stopped by my desk mid-morning, easy smile in place. Great turnout last night, he said. Felt like momentum, you know. Sure did, I replied. He leaned against my desk and talked about the upcoming pitch, how leadership was excited, how this project could change everything. As he spoke, I realized something unsettling. He sounded practiced. Emily texted just before lunch. Miss you, dinner tonight. I stared at the message longer than necessary. Sure, I replied. At noon, I left the building and walked a few blocks despite the cold. I needed air that didn't smell like recycled ambition. I sat on a bench in a small park, my breath fogging the air, and checked my phone again. A new message waited from an unfamiliar number. We should talk, not about feelings, about facts. Lisa. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To go home, eat dinner, pretend the night before hadn't cracked something open. That instinct had kept my life orderly for a long time. But another thought followed, quieter and more dangerous. If Lisa was reaching out, it meant this was bigger than me. I typed back. When Monsieur won over, her reply came immediately. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., corner cafe on Maple and 3rd. Small place, discreet. I locked my phone and exhaled slowly. That evening, Emily talked about work over dinner, about stress, about feeling overlooked. She laughed softly and reached for my hand. I let her. You're quiet, she said. Everything okay? I'm tired, I replied. It was true, just not in the way she meant. That night after she fell asleep, I lay awake again, but my thoughts weren't spinning this time. They were aligning. Lisa knew more than she'd said. Mark was involved in something deliberate, and whatever it wasn't going to resolve itself with honesty or apologies. I didn't feel rage. I felt the unmistakable pressure of a decision forming. Silence had protected my life once. Now it was becoming something else entirely. The cafe on Maple and 3rd was nearly empty when I arrived. It was one of those places designed for people who didn't want to linger, muted wood tables, plain ceramic cups, no music loud enough to invite emotion, the kind of cafe where conversations stayed low and private by default. I chose a seat near the back facing the window where I could watch the street without being watched. Snow from the night before clung to the curb in gray piles. Chicago winter didn't announce itself dramatically. It just stayed. I ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. Lisa arrived exactly on time. She wore a dark coat buttoned high, her hair pulled back loosely. No makeup beyond what was necessary to look awake. She scanned the room once, spotted me, and walked over without hesitation. Thanks for coming, she said quietly, sitting down. I wasn't sure I should, I replied honestly. She nodded. That's normal. We sat in silence for a moment, not awkward, measured. Then she placed a slim folder on the table between us. The cardboard made a soft final sound as it landed. I found out about 3 weeks ago, she said. Not the full scope, just enough to know something was wrong. I looked up. Did you confront him? Yes, she said, once in private. And she let out a slow breath. He said it was nothing, that he and Emily were just collaborating, that I was reading into things because I was tired. I felt a familiar sting at that, how easily doubt could be reframed as weakness. I wanted to believe him, she continued. 20 years doesn't disappear overnight, but lies have a way of getting careless. She opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots, messages between Mark and Emily. Not graphic, not romantic. Worse than that, confident, strategic, filled with references to meetings, drafts, next steps. They were careful, Lisa said. No pictures, no obvious language. But once you stop looking for affection and start looking for coordination, it's all there. I swallowed hard. I didn't come to you immediately, she added, because at first I thought this was just an affair. And now I asked. Now I know it isn't. She slid another page forward. Bank statements. Transfers broken into increments that avoided scrutiny. Payments labeled generically. Dates that lined up too neatly with conference trips and client dinners. One number caught my eye immediately. Our joint account. My chest tightened. They took money. Yes, Lisa said. Small amounts, over time. Enough to test limits. I stared at the paper, a metallic taste rising in my mouth. Not shock, recognition. I checked our accounts last night, I said. I saw patterns. I told myself I was imagining it. You weren't, she replied. And that's the part that made me slow down. I looked at her. Slow down. If I reported this immediately, she explained, they'd claim it was accidental. Overlapping access. Poor controls. Maybe even blame accounting. She tapped the folder lightly. But intent is harder to deny. I leaned back in my chair. The coffee between us had gone cold. What do you need from me? I asked. Confirmation, she said, and patience. She pulled out a tablet and opened a presentation. My presentation. The structure was identical. Slide titles mirrored mine. Even the order of examples followed the same logic. A sentence on slide 4 still contained the typo I'd meant to fix months ago. They copied it, I said quietly. Yes, she replied, and they're planning to pitch it as their own next week. Something settled in my chest then, not anger, not despair. Clarity. If we confront them now, I said slowly, they'll say it was shared. Collaborative. She nodded, exactly. So we let them present it? Yes. So they have to explain it, I continued, thinking aloud. So legal can see it wasn't accidental. She met my eyes. We need them to finish what they started. I ran a hand through my hair. This is going to blow everything up. Lisa looked down at her hands. For the first time, her composure cracked. I know, she said. I don't hate Mark for choosing her. I hate that he chose lies instead of ending it. Her voice steadied again. But I'm done protecting him. I thought of Emily's hand on mine the night before. The way she'd said she felt overlooked. The ease with which she'd lied. I'm in, I said. Lisa exhaled slowly, relief passing over her face like a shadow lifting. Then we do this clean, she said. No theatrics, just facts, metadata, access logs, bank records. I nodded. I can help with that. As we stood to leave, she paused. One more thing, she said. There will be moments you'll want to confront her, to demand explanations. I already knew what she was going to say. Don't, she continued. Emotion gives them room to rewrite the story. Outside, the cold hit hard. I walked back toward the office with the folder tucked under my arm, my steps slow and deliberate. I wasn't angry. I was adjusting. And for the first time since the party, I understood the real weight of what we were carrying. Truth wasn't loud. It was heavy. The next 7 days passed more slowly than they should have. Not because time dragged, but because every hour carried weight. Each conversation, each email, each shared meal felt like it belonged to 2 different lives happening at once. On the surface, nothing changed. I still woke before my alarm, still poured coffee into the same chipped mug, still kissed Emily on the cheek before work and asked about her meetings. I nodded at Mark in the hallway. I answered emails. I attended planning calls. I smiled when expected. I became very good at looking normal. Underneath, everything tightened. Lisa and I spoke only when necessary. Short messages, precise language, no speculation, no emotional shorthand. Every exchange assumed it might one day be read aloud by someone who didn't know us. Facts only. By the second day, I pulled access logs from IT under the pretense of a routine audit. Nothing flashy, no alarms, just timestamps and IP addresses that told a story quietly and convincingly. Emily's credentials had accessed my archived project folders late at night twice, both times aligned with days Mark had requested updated drafts for review. I documented it. On day 3, I found the first moment of weakness. It was late. Emily was asleep. I sat alone in the living room scrolling through old photos on my phone. Thanksgiving dinners, vacation snapshots, a Christmas morning where we both looked younger and foolishly confident. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard. For a moment, I wanted to wake her, to ask why, to ask if any of it had been real. I stood up, walked halfway to the stairs, then stopped. Emotion gives them room to rewrite the story. I turned around and went back to the couch. By day 4, Mark asked me to review the final version of the presentation deck. Just want your eyes on it, he said casually, leaning against my doorframe. You know how leadership is. Of course, I replied. Send it over. He did without hesitation. That night, I compared the files side by side. Same flow, same phrasing, same logic, even the same unnecessary slide I'd debated cutting months earlier. They hadn't collaborated. They'd copied. Lisa confirmed what I already knew. Metadata's intact. Creation dates don't lie. On day 5, Emily's behavior shifted again. She was warmer, almost nostalgic. She cooked dinner twice, suggested a weekend trip after things calmed down, touched my arm when she spoke as if checking whether I was still there. Guilt, maybe. Or instinct. Either way, it reinforced what Lisa had warned me about. They felt safe. That night, I finally checked our retirement account, the one we rarely discussed, the one we treated like a locked room. Nothing dramatic, But again, patterns, small reallocations, short-term withdrawals masked as internal adjustments. It wasn't reckless. It was practiced. On day 6, Lisa called me for the first time. Not a message, a call. I'm tired, she admitted quietly. Not of this, of pretending I don't miss who he used to be. I didn't interrupt. I don't hate him for choosing her, she continued. I hate that he chose deceit over honesty, over endings. There was silence on the line. Not heavy, just real. We're almost there, I said. I know, she replied, and that scares me more than the beginning did. The final day arrived with no warning signs. Emily left early, dressed carefully. Mark sent a thumbs-up emoji in the group chat. The building buzzed with anticipation. The pitch was scheduled for mid-afternoon. Leadership, legal, HR, all present. At noon, Lisa sent the final message. Everything's ready. Legal has the file. We let them speak. I read it twice. Then I deleted it. At 2:30, I took my seat in the second row of the conference room. Lisa sat 3 seats behind me, angled slightly away. We didn't acknowledge each other. Mark stood at the podium, confident and relaxed. Emily beside him, tablet in hand. They began. And as they did, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't about catching them in a lie. It was about letting them prove it. The presentation started the way all important meetings do, quietly. No dramatic music, no tension anyone could name yet. Just the soft shuffle of papers, the low hum of the projector, the polite clearing of throats as people settled into their seats. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, the Chicago sky hung low and gray, the kind of winter afternoon that made everything feel heavier than it looked. I sat in the second row, hands folded, eyes forward. Lisa was 3 seats behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Her presence was steady, like a fixed point I could return to if my thoughts started to drift. Mark stepped up first. He looked confident, relaxed. The kind of man who believed he was about to be rewarded for patience and cleverness. He thanked leadership for their time, made a small joke about long agendas, and launched into the opening slide. This initiative represents a strategic opportunity, he said, voice smooth. One that positions us for long-term growth. Heads nodded. Emily took over seamlessly, explaining timelines and deliverables with practiced ease. She spoke as if the words were hers, as if she hadn't lifted them whole from someone else's work. I watched her hands as she gestured, steady, controlled. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not grief. Recognition. This was the moment Lisa had been waiting for. Not the kiss, not the lies at home. This. Intent. They weren't hiding anymore. They were claiming. 5 minutes into the deck, the door at the back of the room opened quietly. No one turned at first. 2 people stepped in, one from legal, one from compliance. The shift in the room was subtle but immediate. Chairs straightened, pens paused. The CEO glanced toward them, then back at the screen. Before we continue, she said evenly, we need to address something. Mark hesitated just a fraction of a second too long. Yes, he said, forcing a smile. The CEO folded her hands on the table. Legal received documentation this morning, raising concerns about the origin of this material. The room stilled. Emily's eyes flicked toward Mark. This documentation includes original drafts, access logs, metadata, and financial records, the CEO continued. We're going to pause the presentation. Mark let out a short laugh. I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. Legal stepped forward. We'd like you to explain why large portions of this deck match internal files authored by Mr. Caldwell, word for word, including timestamps predating your involvement. Every head in the room turned toward me. I stood. Yes, I said calmly. Those drafts are mine. I've retained originals with creation dates and access histories. Emily inhaled sharply. Mark shook his head. Ryan shared those files. This was collaborative. Legal nodded. We considered that, which is why we also reviewed access logs. She looked at Emily. Your credentials accessed Mr. Caldwell's archive folders on 2 separate occasions outside normal business hours. Emily's face drained of color. I was asked to review something, she said, voice trembling. I didn't plan. The CEO raised a hand. We're not finished. Compliance added, we also identified transfers linked to a newly formed LLC funded through accounts connected to both presenters. These coincide with dates on your travel reimbursements. Mark's composure cracked. This is out of context, he said quickly. We intended to clarify ownership before. Before presenting it as your own, the CEO asked. Silence. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I felt trapped, she said softly. He told me it was temporary, that we'd fix it. No one responded. The CEO turned to legal. Suspend the presentation. Escort Mr. Reynolds and Ms. Caldwell to HR. Security appeared not aggressively, just present enough to end the conversation. As Mark gathered his things, his eyes met mine. For the first time, there was no confidence there, just calculation giving way to reality. Lisa stood as they were let out, her expression unreadable. As the room emptied, the CEO addressed those who remained. This meeting is adjourned. We'll follow up with next steps. People filed out quietly, conversations, hushed glances, careful. The room felt smaller now, stripped of illusion. Lisa passed by me on her way out. We needed them to say it out loud, she murmured. They did. I nodded. Outside the conference room, Emily waited near the elevator's, arms wrapped around herself. Ryan, she said, please. I stopped a few feet away. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered. I know, I replied, but wanting isn't the same as choosing. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I walked past her without another word. In the hallway, I felt something loosen, not relief exactly, but release. The truth hadn't exploded. It had simply been placed on the table, undeniable. And that was enough. The hallway felt longer after they were escorted out. Not physically, just emotionally, as if the air itself had thickened. Conversations started and stopped in low murmurs. People avoided eye contact. Doors closed more softly than usual, like the building was trying not to make noise. I didn't return to my seat. I stepped outside instead, letting the cold Chicago air hit my face. Snow drifted lightly, the kind that didn't commit to falling, but lingered anyway. The city kept moving. Cars passed. Someone argued into a phone. Life apparently didn't pause for moral collapses. Lisa joined me a moment later. She didn't say anything at first, neither did I. They'll suspend him today, she said eventually. HR already started the paperwork. And Emily, I asked. Administrative leave, she replied. Legal will sort the rest. I nodded, complicated as expected. We stood there a while longer, two people who had just watched their past detach itself cleanly from the present. I'm tired, Lisa said quietly. It wasn't a complaint, just a fact. I know, I replied. Inside, the company moved into damage control mode with the efficiency of a place that had practiced for this kind of moment. Emails went out. Calendars changed. Meetings were postponed. A brief internal notice followed before the end of the day. 2 employees have been placed on leave pending investigation into violations of company policy. No names, no explanation. Clean language for a messy truth. I went home early. The house felt different when I opened the door, not hollow like before, but tense, as if something had been waiting for me to arrive. Emily sat at the dining table, her coat still on her purse, untouched at her feet. Her eyes were red, but her posture was rigid, like she'd rehearsed what she was going to say. You blindsided me, she said. I set my keys down carefully. I stopped covering for you. Her jaw tightened. You could have talked to me. You didn't have to humiliate us. This wasn't about humiliation, I said. It was about the truth. She stood abruptly. You planned this. Yes, I replied. The word landed hard between us. She searched my face, maybe for anger, maybe for satisfaction. She didn't find either. I planned not to be lied to anymore, I continued. I planned not to lose my work, my name, and my future quietly. Her voice broke. I felt invisible. I let the silence stretch before answering. I believe you, I said, but feeling invisible doesn't justify erasing someone else. She sank back into the chair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into my bag and placed a thin envelope on the table. What's that? She asked. Clarity, I said. Inside were copies of financial statements, a preliminary separation agreement prepared by an attorney I trusted, and a list of steps already taken, accounts secured, passwords, changed access, revoked. She stared at the papers as if they were written in a language she hadn't learned. You talked to a lawyer, she whispered. I talked to reality, I replied. The lawyer helped translate. She covered her face with her hands. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I thought about that. I know, I replied, but intent matters. You taught me that. That night, Emily packed a suitcase and moved into the guest room. I slept alone in the bed we'd shared for decades and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I'd won, not because I'd punished anyone, but because I wasn't negotiating with denial anymore. The following days unfolded with precision. Legal interviewed me. I provided documentation. IT confirmed access logs. Compliance traced transactions. Each department worked in isolation, methodical, and unemotional. Facts move faster than feelings ever could. Mark didn't contact me. Emily and I spoke only about logistics, mail forwarding schedules, the dog. She apologized once quietly without expectation. I accepted it without promising forgiveness. I wanted to forgive you, I told her one evening. But forgiveness doesn't mean continuing to live together. She nodded, understanding too late what that meant. One afternoon, I found myself alone in my office packing up old project drafts. I didn't feel anger as I cleared the drawer, just finality. I took only what mattered. As I zipped my bag, I realized something else had changed. I wasn't afraid of what came next. The fear had lived in uncertainty and sensing something was wrong, and convincing myself it wasn't worth confronting. Now, with everything exposed, fear had nowhere to hide. That evening, Lisa and I met for a quiet dinner at a restaurant neither of us had ever visited before. Neutral ground. We didn't talk about Mark. We didn't talk about Emily. We talked about sleep, about therapy, about how strange it felt to be tired in a clean way. I don't feel victorious, she said at one point. Neither do I replied. She nodded. Good, that means we didn't lose ourselves. When I got home, Emily was gone. A note waited on the counter. I'll stay with my sister for a while. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. That night, for the first time since the party, I slept deeply. Not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was hidden anymore. The house learned how to be quiet again. Not the brittle quiet that follows an argument or the hollow quiet of waiting for someone to come home. This was different. It settled slowly, room by room, as if the walls themselves were adjusting to a new truth. I changed the locks 2 days after Emily left. Not out of anger, not out of fear, out of clarity. I separated the accounts, starting with the joint savings and the retirement fund. The 401k paperwork took longer than expected forms, signatures, waiting periods, but there was comfort in the process. Numbers lined up. Ownership was defined. Nothing was vague anymore. Emily came by once midweek to collect a few remaining things. She stood in the doorway like a guest unsure of the rules. We spoke quietly, practically. She apologized again, this time without explanation or defense. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, she said. No, I replied, but it matters how you say it. She nodded, eyes downcast, then left without looking back. At work, the investigation moved forward without spectacle. Mark's name disappeared from calendars. Emily's office stayed dark. The project they'd tried to claim was frozen, then reassigned under formal review, this time with documentation so thorough it left no room for interpretation. Leadership thanked me for my professionalism. Legal thanked me for my restraint. No one called it bravery. I didn't need them to. One afternoon, I walked past the conference room where everything had come undone. The chairs were stacked, the projector unplugged. Sunlight cut across the floor in a way that made the space feel ordinary again. The room had done its job. Lisa and I stayed in touch, though our conversations changed. Less evidence, more life. We met for coffee one Saturday morning back at the same cafe on Maple and 3rd. Snowmelt dripped from the awning outside. People typed on laptops, argued softly about nothing important, lived their lives inches away from ours without knowing how close they sat to the edge of someone else's collapse. How are you sleeping, she asked. Better, I said. Still wake up early, but I don't lie there wondering what I missed. She smiled faintly. Same. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Do you ever think about confronting it sooner, she asked. Saying something the moment you knew. I considered the question. Sometimes, I said, but then I remember that waiting wasn't weakness, it was preparation. She nodded. People confuse silence with surrender. That's because they don't see the work happening underneath, I replied. The quiet work I'd learned was choosing myself in ways I hadn't before. Running again in the mornings, even when the sidewalks were slick with winter grime. Cooking meals that took time. Turning down meetings that didn't matter. Saying no without explaining myself. I started therapy not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd ignored my own instincts for so long. Months passed. The company stabilized. I was offered a leadership role on a new initiative, one built transparently, collaboratively with oversight that felt almost reassuring. I accepted not for validation, but because it felt clean. Emily and I finalized the separation without drama. She moved on quickly. I wished her well without following her path. One evening, I stood at the kitchen counter and set a glass of water down. The sound caught my attention. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't brittle. It landed solidly, whole. I smiled without realizing it. The truth about what people call quiet revenge is this: it isn't revenge at all. It's the decision to stop disappearing, to stop absorbing damage in silence and calling it love, to stop mistaking endurance for dignity, to stop confusing patience with self-erasure. It's the moment you choose to see clearly and then act without cruelty, without spectacle, without asking permission. The real show never needed an audience. It only needed the truth. Sometimes I think about that night at the party, the music, the laughter, the way everything looked intact until it wasn't. I remember how close I came to confronting them in the moment, how easy it would have been to explode. And I'm grateful I didn't. Because waiting didn't cost me my voice. It gave it shape. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever stayed silent to protect yourself, or wondered whether confronting the truth immediately was the right choice, I'd like to know. Have you ever chosen silence as a strategy, or did you choose to face things head on? Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell me where you're listening from. We have many more stories like this, stories about dignity, clarity, and rebuilding without losing yourself. If you'd like to continue this journey with us, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Sometimes the strongest endings don't make noise. They make room.